I wasn't sure if you got my like messages on Discord.
Yeah. I
Sorry,
got it. Yeah.
there was some miscommunication, but we are here. That this is all what matters. So another episode of Play Like Karpov, and today's topic is Good Night, Bad Bishop, and I brought you
Okay.
two games. If in case we couldn't finish, the first. I mean, if we could finish the first game a little bit earlier, then we will have a second game as well. The first game is gonna be a Karpov Kremny game from Vienna 1994, and this is going to be an endgame, but like very complex endgame. Let
Okay.
me invite you for in the room. Hold on a second. What do I? Okay.
Okay, I got it.
You got it?
Yeah. Yeah, I see the position.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So this endgame, um, occurred in Karpov Kramnik game. First of all, obviously, I'm not gonna ask who is better, because if someone can be better, it's only white. But what do you think? Is this a real advantage, or it's just a dead draw? How would you?
I wouldn't even be close to thinking this is a dead draw. I think white stands much better here.
Mm-hmm.
I
Okay.
I will get the knight to f5. I mean that's just very natural. I think the h6 pawn is very very weak, and his king will need to stay there, and I think I have a lot of play here. So yes, I would definitely be pretty disappointed if I wouldn't win this with white.
Really?
Yes.
Really? It's that.
I mean,
I mean, the
at least
position
it
is
looks
actually,
like. I mean,
yeah, it's very close to equal.
okay. I
Of,
mean,
of course, the knight has a beautiful outpost on f5. After you go knight h4, knight h4, knight f5, and yeah, we can also target h6. Knight would look amazing on f5. Actually, if you look a little bit closer, the king can actually deal with that knight on f5. It can get to g6, protecting h6. Everything comes down to the open files. First of all, white is on turn right now, so also I'm not so sure if how would you because most likely there will be some trades in the open files, because the rooks will
yeah.
come to the E and D files. Potentially, maybe we can also use the C file, but yeah, the bishop is just probably going to remain on this diagonal, so there will be no chance to penetrate in the seventh rank. So probably we will use these open files for the rooks. So potentially there will be some trades on the open files. Actually, if you could you or would you trade both of the rooks, or
No.
you would keep one pair of rooks on the
Definitely.
board?
Just having this advantage of knight against bishop, probably it's not enough to win. So yeah, I think in order to have winning chances, you need to have the at least one pair of rooks on the board. So probably trading one pair is beneficial to me, but both rooks, I mean, I think we need rooks on the board in order to win.
Again, I think it's very, very important to mention that how close our king is to the center, because let's say if you are trading both of the rooks down, if our king can get to e4, we already have a very good winning chances, because we can support the knight on f5, and maybe maybe the king has a free way to the queen side, and after, let's say, from knight jumping to d5, bishop takes d6, king takes d6, and we are so close to the pawns, and we will convert it to like winning pawn endgame. So again, it's it's depending how close our king can get to the center, or the queen side as well. Of course, the king is very close. If it gets to e6, probably will not win the game. But even then, we will have like decent chance. All right. First of all, how would you play now? It's white is on turn. Karpov was on turn. We just queens got traded on f6, and yeah, you're on turn.
Yeah, I think there is no hurry to place the knight on f5. I mean, I could potentially start with moves like g4, but I think taking over the files first is more important. So,
yeah, I mean g4 is running into rook g8.
Oh yes, of course. That also, yeah.
So I mean g4 rook g8.
We cannot play.
Immediately. So first of all, I think we should this plan is going to be there in many cases. I mean, maybe black can take away this square from the knight, the jumping on f5, but this one definitely not. So yeah, I mean, open files will be very important. The question is, which one, rook d1 or rook e1?
I think playing rook d1, rook a d1, of course. I think so. Just so I support the d4 square a little bit more. I don't see the big difference. Otherwise, I don't.
Okay, so rook d8, let's say.
Probably knight d4. Although knight d4, bishop e5.
But we are running into bishop e5.
Yeah, this is bad.
Yeah. I mean, this can kind of like transpose the game, except yeah, kinda, yeah, this can transpose the game in a way. So Karpov started with rook f1, because if you play rook f1, I'm not so sure if, because now we definitely have to evaluate this endgame. I mean, this is the time for to calculate if we can take king f1, how close we are. Actually, not quite.
Yeah,
sure
we are not.
If we are close.
I don't think.
The problem is we can't really use this square, and the bishop will get to b6. And once he's he's weakening the pawn, so once black will force this pawn to move, all of a sudden the king has access to some squares as well. So if we just move if we're trying to move the king towards the queen side, all of a sudden the king has a path to targeting our pawns. So I don't think we are getting there on time. So this is why Karpov started with rook f1. He played rook f1 first. Of course, rook e7 cannot be allowed. So rook f8 probably only move. And now he played rook ad1. And now Kramnik chose to take on e1. In case of rook ad8, because if he goes rook ad8 now, we just takes, and rook d7. And now, of course, rook e1 is not possible. The knight is covering the square, and we are winning material here. Of course, black cannot do this. So by rook fe1, actually we could avoid trading both of the rooks. So this is why he did that. I mean, of course, in the previous line, what you mentioned is rook d1, rook d8. After rook fe1 takes rook d8, we could still go rook e1, but we are
losing the tempo.
We lost the tempo. So this is why we play rook fe1, rook fe8, rook a d1, rook e1, rook takes e1, rook d8, and actually it was okay, your turn.
I think we need to make luft for the king, so I would probably play g4 here.
G4, but G4 isn't it running into rook G8 again?
Again, oh my,
rook rook E7.
I am missing. Yeah, this is sorry.
It's not that clear actually. So G4 rook G8. Let's say you go H3.
Yeah.
And now F5 or H5, and rook E7.
Yeah, probably you play F5 here, but okay. I mean, this I think might also be much better for white actually. Yeah, I mean, probably you have to do something. Yeah, you take. I take back. King F1. Maybe
why is it much better?
Yeah, I thought I would pick all the pawns, but
even rook C4.
I am.
He would get to C2, bishop B6. I mean, I don't think we are better.
Nah, absolutely. Yeah.
No, also I mean he yeah. So rook G8 is I would be very careful about moving moving G4. I don't think we need that at all. So G4 is probably not the move you want to make here. As Karpov, I mean, as we know, Karpov is he was probably the most patient player of all time. He didn't rush anywhere. Since black has no threats, we don't really have to be super prophylactical right now because the rook cannot penetrate on the second rank. The knight is covering the square. He cannot really make trades right now. The bishop cannot target anything. So we have all the time we need. Of course, time actually matters because if the king can get to G6, pushing F5, put the king on F6, of course he can. Black can actually improve the position, but he cannot really create any threats. But first things first. You were absolutely right about making a luft, but G4 is probably not the way to do that.
Yeah, I also don't really like the move G3. So yeah, I guess I'm left with king to F1, which I actually.
What's wrong with G3?
I mean, I'm putting the pawns on dark squares.
Yeah, but
I mean.
You are. It's very important to note that that you didn't fix them yet.
Okay.
So there is a huge difference between placing your pawns on a square of the enemy bishop. Or fixing your pawns on the square of your enemy bishop. There is a huge difference. So that G3 move, I mean, that can easily change. But the problem is, if you play H3, you might place two of your pawns on light squares, but basically with that you didn't really make a luft because your king cannot really go out. The king is probably shouldn't go this way because after rook d1, you don't want to place your king to e2. I mean, your king is so much safer on g2. So, and while we are keeping the rooks on the board, it's actually irrelevant. I mean, what square you're placing your pawns. The only pawn can be targeted at this point is f2. But I mean, you're protecting it with the king. So, as long as the rook is not getting to the second rank, you're good. So this can easily change. I mean, your pawns will hardly be fixed at all, because I mean black is having a horrible pawn structure on the king side. So your pawns will never be fixed. So this is why g3 was played. G3 was played. I mean, he wants king g2, and this is the way we can improve the position. I mean, the problem is if you play king f1, if you played king f1, you can't really improve your position, because he just goes rook d7, and now what? How do you bring the king? You have to, again, after king e2, you have to consider if trades are beneficial for you. But again, how do we move forward from now on? The king must come a little bit closer to the center, but it cannot really do that because king e2 is like looks weird. So this is why he played g3. Your king will be very safe. Your king will be safe on g2, and actually the fact that you place your pawns on dark squares is right now it's irrelevant, and it can easily change. Of course, Kramnik played rook d7 because now rook e7 is a threat. And by this g3, actually, we also won time because we are threatening rook e7, because now rook d1 is not a threat. So rook d7, he had to stop rook e7, and now what?
Probably I just play king g2 and I'm, as you mentioned, bringing the king closer. And maybe if my king will be close enough at some point, maybe I have knight h4, knight f5, rook e7. Which looks actually very good. Also, I could be threatening at that point, like knight d5, if I play f4 first, yeah? That also, but yeah, I like that.
Yeah, f4 is, I'm not quite sure if you want to weakening, the second rank.
Oh, that's also true.
Yeah, so I would probably keep this pawn as long as we can on f2. Just to make sure that your king is safe and the rook will not find any target on the second rank. Actually, what Karpov played, it was again the 3+1 rule, right? Now the 3+1 rule is it's very easy to use. So which piece can be improved? First of all, we check the trades. It's hard to decide who will get benefited by the trades, but right now we can't really trade anything here. How about the improving pieces part from the 3+1 rule? How would you? Which piece can be improved? Okay, the king can.
Yeah,
but it doesn't make big changes in the position. If you improve the king, okay, you can make it one step closer to the center, or you can play king g2, but it doesn't really do big changes. So we need something major to win the game. We need some major improvements. But first things first. Which piece would you improve if you could?
I mean, probably my knight.
But what's the problem once you move the knight anywhere?
Yeah, bishop e5, I think.
Bishop what? Bishop e5?
Bishop e5, yeah. I mean, for example, knight h4, bishop e5, I'm not really... Oh, also rook d2 is the problem, yeah. So
yeah, rook d2. Rook d2 is the main problem.
Yeah,
and rook d2 is the main problem.
As yeah, so probably we play rook to e2 now, yeah?
Yes, stopping exactly. This is what happened.
Yeah, it's very logical when you think like that.
Yeah, exactly. So in any case, we move the knight. We just stop. From now on, the rook d2 will not be possible. So by making a prophylactic move, like by trying to improve, the knight. At the same time, we made a prophylactic move, because now after knight h4, rook d2 will not be possible. Also, bishop e5 will not be possible. And by the way, bishop e5, if we made enough preparation moves, we can probably play f4 after knight h4, because now from that point, the second rank is secured. So
Yeah.
there is no rook d2 from that point, and we can just bring the king a little bit closer, put the knight on f5, and we have a wonderful endgame. All right, and now Kramnik made the first mistake, and he played king g7. The king g7. Surprisingly, this was a mistake. According to engine, f5 should have been played, and preparing for knight h4 and trying to get rid of that f pawn. Black's pawn structure, even if this trade happens, is still worse. But at least he could get rid of one of his pawns from of the f file, and I think every trade, every pawn trade gets Black a little bit closer to the draw, of course, because he has, especially if we are talking about the king side pawns, because his king side pawns are the real problem, not the queen side pawns. Queen side pawns are doing all right. So probably he should have grabbed the opportunity and while he could, and play immediately f5, because after king g7, obviously knight h4 happened, and from now on he has no access to f5. So he cannot get rid of the pawn. So this is why f5 was better. And in case, let's say, if he played f5, in case king g2, he doesn't have to play f4 now. He can start with king g7. The king gets to f6. So actually, he's not really threatening to push f4. It was not a big point. Of course, he has to push f4 in case of knight h4, but actually he wants to bring the king closer. But he started with king g7. This was a wrong move order, because now knight h4, and now the king cannot get closer to the center. He cannot stabilize. Now he doesn't have access to f5. At knight h4, I mean knight f5 must be stopped. I mean, if he, I mean, of course, maybe not immediately, but once, let's say, we play king g2, f4, king f3, knight f5, we'll have king g4 as well, and the rook will get to e8, and we can also put up some mating nets in the king side. So knight f5 must be subbed, and that's why Kramnik played rook d5. Of course, this move had downside as well, because now he is not controlling over the 7th rank. So this is why Karpov played rook e7. But of course, Kramnik had an answer. He played rook c5. This is how he tried to deal with the rook on e7, and maybe he can just make it go by king f8, king e8. Of course, we are not going to make this trade. This is the only trade we will never do. So we will never. Basically, we can make 2 trades: rooks and knights. Rooks. Okay, that one is so much better to trade the rooks, but the knight for the bishop we will never trade, because I mean, from now on, this is an easily holdable endgame for Black. So we will never trade this knight for the bishop. Never, ever. And now Karpov made an interesting move. He played rook d7. He is preparing for king f8. Of course, rook c2 is not a big deal, because he can just play knight f5. So rook c2 is never really the case until we have access to knight f5. Kramnik played b5. Logical move. How would you play now? Actually, this rook d7 move was also a prophylactic move, and you will understand why.
Yeah, so I think I still wanna improve my knight, so I think now is this time I can play finally pawn to g4. I mean, of course, with the idea of knight to f5. And from there, maybe rook d7 had the intention if king to g6 was played, that maybe he has knight e7 check. Otherwise I don't really know yet why rook d7 has that big of an importance part. So yes, I think g4.
Yeah. Because whenever you give knight f5 check, he goes king f8, and then you can take on a6.
Oh, yeah.
And the rook is not hanging.
Okay, that's also.
So that was a huge point. So okay. Basically, by rook d7, Karpov prepared for king f8, and in that case, the pawn will be hanging on h6, and his rook is not hanging on e7. So this was a huge point of rook d7. So basically, it was a prophylactic move. G4. This was not how he he fought for f5 square. How about h5? I'm thinking.
Yeah, I probably still go knight h5 and maybe just solidify with
king g6.
Maybe I can play h3.
But h3, but as always, I'm super happy with if I can get some trades. Maybe king g5 I can play. And now black is putting up a fight. Now he finally found some targets.
Yeah, probably.
So I don't really like the idea of g4. Actually, g4 never happened in the game, because basically you see what just happened. So you were so afraid of placing your pawn on a dark square, and because the bishop might find targets on the dark squares, against your pawns. But right now you just place your pawn on a light square, and it still got you just advance it too far. So now we actually, by this g4, we kind of broke this harmony of our pawn structure, because now all of a sudden we have to defend stuff. We didn't have to defend a single thing while we kept this pawn structure, because this is just rock solid. Also sometimes, so especially in those endgames, so placing it, this is why chess is very, very complex, because sometimes you're absolutely right that it's not a smart idea to place your pawns on the same color as your opponent's bishop, but in some cases it guarantees that it's just taking away squares, right? Because it's taking away f4 square, and just trying to paralyze the bishop, the space of the bishop. So that's why it's so difficult, because you have to decide if it's beneficial or not. There is not a single rule for that, or not a single pattern for that. It's just you have to decide if it's good or not. So you have to evaluate yourself. So right now, I think these pawns are not weak at all. But in the very first moment you play g4, you actually make your g4 pawn as a target. You just created a target after h5. Because if you take it, there is rook h5, and as I mentioned, the rook end games are just dead draws. Okay, we have a passed pawn. He has double pawns, but this is not enough. We would need some minor piece to continue, creating targets. But exchanging the knight is never a target, never an answer. So if you play knight f5, just king g6, h3 takes, and king g5, and all of a sudden he has such a strong and active king. and you will struggling, protecting g4. How do you protect now? It's hard to see. Knight e3 goes bishop f4, and all of a sudden you see how important was keeping the pawn on g3, because now all of a sudden the bishop has access to this square. So your knight, in many cases, your knight will land on e3. In these cases, you always have access to this. So the bishop f4 is this pawn makes sure that the bishop has no access to f4 square. But all of a sudden you push it, you push it a little bit too far, and even your king is a little bit, it's still not there to protect it. So g4 is not the way to fight for f5 square. Somehow we have to deflect the rook from c5.
Yeah, so probably we can play b4 maybe?
Yes, exactly. This is what happened in the game. b4. And not even mentioning that once the rook gets to c2, we actually moved one potential pawn from the second rank. So we only have to deal with one from that point. So this is why b4 is we hit two birds with one shot with this b4. The rook c2, of course. Now what?
I don't think we need to do anything with the a2 pawn, so probably knight f5.
King g6.
And probably knight e7, knight d5. Although maybe he can play rook d2 there.
Or bishop e5. So if you give a check, king e7, knight d5, he can probably play bishop e5. This is hanging and he has bishop d4.
Oh, okay.
And all of a sudden he found, counterplay on the second rank. We can't allow this rook on the second rank. We simply cannot allow. The rook cannot stay on c2.
So probably we'll play knight d4 now. Or knight e3.
Knight e3, yes, exactly. Knight e4 is a very unstable square for the knight. And as you mentioned, he has rook d2.
Yeah.
And again, we are trading the minor pieces, and it's just it's just an immediate draw. Probably rook takes c7 is only move because bishop e5 is coming, and f4 doesn't really solve the problem because the bishop b3 moves here. So this is why we have to play knight e3. We temporarily move the knight from f5 just to make the rook go away from the second rank, because for this rook the only active square is c2. From now on, of course, he has to keep his rook on the c file, otherwise he's losing c7. So he played rook c1, check, king g2, bishop e5. How you play now? First, we always check what the opponent is threatening with, and then we'll try to find the plan according to that. So what is Black's plan here? He just he just freed his bishop. Now his rook is also free.
Yeah, so maybe rook a1.
Yes, rook a1. And the last thing we want to do is defending passively that a2 pawn. Yeah. And actually, we can't even do that because rook d2, I'm just showcasing. Let's say we just make a random move, rook a1, rook d2, and after bishop c3, we lose material, and all of a sudden we are worse. So of course we cannot allow that. So now we have to be prophylactic, or we have to like act actively.
I think we can be active, Although f4, maybe he has bishop c3.
F4 in this case, I'm not so sure how much I like, because we're kind of weakening e3 knight. Not so sure. Okay, not immediately. So he cannot target the knight immediately, because we are covering d4 square. But later, also we are giving up on the second rank, and from that point, at any time he's taking this guy, is going to be a check. So f4 I would be very very careful about.
Yeah, so maybe I wanna be prophylactic if that doesn't work. So maybe I go rook to d3. Actually, I like this idea. Of course, rook a1, rook a3 drops a pawn, I believe.
Yeah, I meant to play rook b1.
Okay, now I go a3.
I go here.
Okay, and probably yeah, maybe just king f3, bishop b2, rook c, knight c2. I I don't know if that's actually any good.
How do you play here?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Rook d2, I think he has this.
Yeah.
Knight e3, rook c3. No, this is passive defending. This is passive defending. This is not what Karpov did. This is passive. We have basically only one move here, which can make some progress. But Kramnik missed a huge chance. I'm pretty sure he would have nowadays he would have defended that way. If I'm not mistaken, Kramnik was 20 years old in this game. He was born in 76, so he was 20 years old. Of course, he was not mature enough to hold this against Karpov.
Logical.
But like prime Kramnik, I'm pretty sure would have drawn this. So how can we deal with those queenside pawns in the same time we are making an active move by making an active move? How is this possible?
Yeah. I don't want to play a move like rook a7 because he has bishop d4 and I don't see other active ideas. So maybe.
Exactly, this is what happened. But Kramnik missed to play bishop d4.
Oh yeah. Wow.
Kramnik didn't wanna lose material, and this was the wrong mindset. So
Yeah, but the rook
um,
endgame is probably. I mean, it's winning or probably not. Yeah.
no, it's not. It's probably a
Oh
draw. Do you remember last time when we checked isolated pawn 2.0, that Korchnoi
yeah.
Karpov game when
Yeah.
Korchnoi passively tried to keep the material instead of trying to be active, and maybe he sacrificed material, but he tries to defend the position in an active way, like making active moves and dropping the material, but being so much more active. This
Yeah.
was the same exact mindset what Kramnik missed here. So Karpov played rook a7. Now, of course, and now Kramnik played rook c6. He chose passive defending over over sacrificing material for an active rook, and this was his last chance to exchange this bishop for this knight. Of course, this was the call he had to make. He should have made, because it's still so much easier to make a draw in the pawn down rook endgame than facing this knight for the rest of the game. And actually, I'm not saying this is an easy draw, but
Yeah.
I don't really see how white can make progress here, because in case of king f3, rook takes h2, let's say king e4, black just goes rook g2, rook a5. I'm not even sure why black is taking on g3. I think simply h5 is fine as well. Maybe he can just go h5. But according to engine, rook takes g3, rook takes b5, and now h5. Since the king is cut from the pawn, so this rook will get to g1, and the king cannot really get closer to the pawn, and these pawns are just too slow. They should be advanced so much further to have a race. So in case of rook b8, king g7, of course black is not allowing rook h8. So h4, rook h8, this would be wrong for black. Just king g7, rook b5, and king g6. And this is easy. But I don't really see why black has to take on g3. He can also play h5.
Probably.
He can start with h5. Because rook takes b5, he can take maybe a2. But I mean, this 3 against this 3 should be a draw. Whenever the king tries to get closer, I mean, the rook is very, very fast. Also rook b8, sometimes king g5, king g4. This has to be a draw. If white try to keep h2 by playing king g1, it doesn't lean anywhere. Of course, black can play king f5, not even mentioning rook c1 check, and he can just go back to c2. So I don't really understand why bishop d4 didn't happen. I'm pretty sure Prime Kramnik would have chose this rook endgame over keeping the minor pieces on the board. This was a terrible decision. So you played rook c6. Your turn. I mean, before Karpov couldn't do any better. So Kramnik was defending really, really well. He missed one chance to play f5, but from that point he found all the best moves. But here he choked a little bit. I mean, it was kind of time trouble because this rook c6 move was move 34. So maybe he was in time trouble. I don't know.
Yeah, probably.
And he had to make a decision very quick, and he couldn't, he panicked and he played rook c6.
Yeah.
This is like a very 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 important principle. So always try to active or defend actively. Then and even if you have to drop a pawn, I mean most of the cases, like I would say more than 50% of the times, like pawn down rook end games are just draw. Of course, it really depends on how the pawns are placed on the board, but rook end games, if you're pawn down, are very good chance that you can reach a draw. But like keeping this knight on the board, I don't know.
Yeah, probably. So, I mean, now I probably just go knight d5.
Yes, exactly. We have to move the knight because bishop d4 was threatening. So we definitely we are moving the knight from d5. Unfortunately, f5 square is not available. So we place the knight on d5. Of course, knight e7 is threatening. The way how Kramnik dealt with that, it was bishop d6. King g7 was also possible, but still maybe knight e7 is annoying. So Kramnik had to take this square away from the knight. Bishop d6. What now?
I mean, I wanna just improve my only last piece, probably like king f3 or something like so. I mean, oh, maybe also rook a8 is better, yeah. Like, probably threatening rook g8.
Before like before Kramnik chose, like a major change in the position, like before he tried to find, the best maneuver or the best improvement, he just made a prophylactic move. He played a3.
Okay.
Just in case if he moves the knight, in case he has to move the knight from d5, this pawn will be protected. So whenever black, is trying to target a3 by the rook, this will be always this will be always defending a3, and the bishop can hardly get to b2 because it has to cover e7 square. So a3 before he did any change in the position, he played a3. I'm not so sure if what was your move again. You wanted to play king f3.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure if he can go king f5. Trying to deflect the knight from f5, and if you take on f7, just king e6, double attack, and you can't avoid losing material. So king f5 is kind of annoying now. King is getting to e6, and all of a sudden it's maybe from that point he can, if he kicks the knight away from d5, he can free the bishop, and maybe he can also this is hanging. So we have to deal with this now. If you play a3, of course, after a3 king f5, of course we will not play king f3. Need this one point. This is what happened, by the way. a3 king f5. Now he made a very nice move, knight e3 check. This is why a3 was so important, because now the king has to make a very serious decision. If he goes to e6, he's running into g4. Now g4, the knight will get to f5, because it's very safe to play g4 now. There is no rook c4. The black has to keep the rook on c6. Now we can see how it was such a bad decision to try to defend passively by this rook c6, because now the rook is cannot really move from c6 or from the sixth rank, because this is always hanging. The king cannot really get closer. The king has to keep an eye on this guy. The rook has to keep an eye on this guy. And knight f5 is coming. This is a huge threat. If the bishop moves from f4, then rook e7 check. So the king is actually pretty unsafe on e6. So this is why Kramnik went back to g6, because even this is coming. You know, there are no threats on the 7th rank, and he's protecting h6. Not even mentioning he will get access to h5 in case we go g4 knight f5. So the king is still better. It's weird, but the king is better on g6 than e6. So this is why king g6 happened. And now the time has come.
Yeah, now I probably just go king f3 and I'm like marching down the d5 square. I mean, if I can do that, it's probably
king f3. And now again,
maybe he has to push.
Yeah, he should have played f5.
Yeah,
exactly. He should have played f5, and not allowing king e4. And king e4 was not happening in the game because Kramnik played bishop e5, but again Black got access to something else. But I mean, f5 was probably the right move. It was the right defense. But I mean, the position is already very unpleasant because simply because the rook is very passive, and we have a 7th rank rook which is targeting this guy. If we can somehow find or if we can improve the knight somehow, I don't know how, but maybe for step 1 can be bring the king a little bit closer, get the king to d3, maybe the knight back to d5, and from that point we can look around, and maybe we can find more, or try to get a little bit more. But okay, he played bishop e5. It was not a good decision. Now knight d5, king g7. In case of bishop d6, I think we just go king e4.
Yeah.
And f5 we can go king d4, maybe check. But we are already made some improvements. f4 is not a terrible idea, fixing his pawns. And I don't know, maybe from now on, knight e7 is also interesting because we have such an active king on d3. And the king is already so close to the queen side that I'm not so sure how we can make progress. But of course we can make this move any time. I mean, the king cannot really move. It has to keep an eye on these two guys. The rook has to keep an eye on these two guys. The bishop has to keep an eye on e7. So he's just kind of stuck. I'm not saying it's a Zugzwang, but I think we are close to a Zugzwang. So all we need to do is just create one more weakness, and the game is over. I'm not so sure how to do that, but this is definitely a position which can be improved. So he played king g7. I mean, this is. I mean, maybe the king is a little bit more passive on g7 than g6, but at least the bishop is threatening with bishop b2. So I mean, now in this point, Kramnik chose like active defending over passive, going back to d6. Now knight e7, and now and unluckily for Kramnik, this was move 40, and he had to make a very serious decision. And now he chose, poor him, he chose wrong, because now he chose active defending over passive defending, and now passive defending was the answer. He played rook c3 check. I mean, he lost the coin flip like twice in the game.
Yeah.
He played rook c3 check, which was active defending, and he should have played rook e6. Rook e6 was the right way. Knight f5, king g6, g4. Bishop takes h2. Only move basically. Rook a8, h5, rook g7. I'm pretty sure this was the line he was calculating. Rook king a7, rook g7 check, rook h8 takes, ag4, king g4, rook e2. And now it seems like we are so close, to just build or get some mating net, but we will never get there, unfortunately. And this is probably draw. But of course, it's still looking, very awkward for black, because but black has no longer h6 weakness, and the bishop can also find a target. So it's not easy to make progress here. I mean, I can't blame Kramnik. I mean, misevaluating this line, because it was just looking scary, allowing the knight on f5 and running into these type of things, and this can be very scary. So of course, engines have no emotions, so they can easily calculate this, but human being is probably not starting calculating this. So he played rook c3. I can't blame him. And now Karpov found the right square for the king, and he played king g4. Simply the king is safer on g4 than on e4. In case of king e4, rook takes a3, knight f5, king g6, rook a8, and now black has rook a2. While in the meantime, the king is so much safer, as I said, because there are no rook e2 checks. There are no rook b2, rook takes b4 in case we push f4. So the king is always so much safer here than on e4. We don't want to bring the king closer, because we lost material. We will win material in the king side, and the king will be closer to the pawn. So that it definitely king g4 was the right move. Was the right call. Rook takes a3. Now, how would you play?
Knight f5, and then rook a8. Oh, maybe rook a8 first.
But knight f5, rook a8. He has h5 check, and we lose piece. So rook a8. I'm not so sure if he can go rook a2. Or maybe we have f4.
Okay, but no need for complication. Probably we can play king h5, yeah. Firstly, instead of rook a8.
Instead of rook a8,
here
h5.
Oh, but then rook f3. Yeah, rook
f3. Yeah. This is why he played f4.
Oh, okay, also makes sense.
He played f4. Yeah. According to engine, h4 was also good. H4 was also good. But he played f4. This is so much more human.
Yeah, of course.
Bishop c3. And now he played king h5.
Yeah.
And this is why I said, the king had nothing to do on e4. Of course, the king has to go towards the pawns, and maybe we might lose, both of our pawns on the king side, but we will probably win these two guys, and also our king is going to be so much more active. So this will be the difference between the two sides. But of course, it's going to be a race. Yeah. So bishop takes b4. Now we are 2 pawns down. Knight f5 check. But of course, these two guys are extremely weak, and they will fall for sure. King g8, and now he repeated 1 moves. It didn't really matter, and now he took on h6, just in case, it's like it's psychological. Sometimes I also do this. It's just like showing your opponent that you can make a draw anytime, and just playing on. It's just a demonstration that you could make a draw, but you chose to play on. It's just it's nothing extra. It's just psychological warfare. Rook takes f7, king e8, and now king g6. Of course, we about to push the pawn, and once we place the knight back to h5, pushing the pawn, this is protected, and no one can stop us. The bishop cannot use the diagonal for defending h8, because he has f6 pawn, and of course we can easily deal with these guys, bringing back the rook to b7. But the huge difference is this king is super passive. So the king cannot support the pawns. In the meantime, our king is just supporting our pass pawn. So king g6, bishop c3, knight f5, b4. How would you play now?
Yeah, I think I can just go h4.
H4 is also winning, probably, but it's a little bit scary. It might be winning, but it's a little bit scary, allowing this. But actually, the reason why Karpov chose rook b7, he didn't want to allow this. He didn't want to calculate if it's going to be winning or not. This is why he played rook b7. It's so much easier because in case of b3,
yeah, you have check and knight c5. Probably, yeah.
He has rook a4. I mean, knight d6, king d8, knight c4. He has rook a4. No, it's king f7. And he wants to build this mate.
Oof.
He wants to get this mate. So now the rook has to move from a3 just to have this check after king e6. But if the rook moves from a3, he's losing b3. His only hope. And now we can just go back and we can do the same. But he no longer has this active pawn. And like a scary pawn. So this is why rook b7 was so much better. So even h4 was probably winning, but it was not that simple. It was not that simple because the rook gets to h1 and he will also push the other pawn. He will push the pawn all the way to b2 and he will start to push the pawn. And in case he will sacrifice the rook and he will have two strong passers. So, but this is why rook b7 was such a smart move. Alrighty, where we are. So rook b7. Crummy played rook a2, h4, and look how different is these two pawns because because of the active knight, because of the active king, and this king is basically not doing anything. Even if he guesses c8, we always have this check, so he can't really deflect the rook from b7, and this is really fast, and we can always block the file from the rook in case he goes to h2. Currently played a5, h5, a4, h6, rook h2, h7, king d8, knight h4, f5, and now he just took on b4, rook h3, rook takes a4, and rook g3, king takes f5. So I think this could happen because Kramnik missed huge opportunity to exchange trade the minor pieces. Even if he lost, he could lose a pawn. It just didn't worth it because he defended very passively. So he made the exact same mistake like Korshno in his previous game. So this is I think what the major change in people's defending skills nowadays is. I'm pretty sure like most of the super grandmasters would have found bishop d4 like easily. Of course, you face Karpov, it was time trouble. Yeah, you can panic, but this is the decision you have to make like blindfolded, because otherwise the knight was just too strong. This was just too much to allow. So yeah, we had no time for the other good knight bad bishop example. So I also wanted to show you like a quick middle game. But just in case, check Karpov Dolmatov game in that Sveshnikov.
Okay.
That would be the other one, because next time I wanna show you a different topic. So make sure you check Karpov Dolmatov game. And I can quickly tell you which year was that. Actually, I can't. I don't have the date, but you will easily find it. It was a Sveshnikov.
Okay.
It was a Sveshnikov. Karpov Dolmatov.
Okay, I will.
That one is a brilliant game.
Okay, thank you.
And if you could find some analysis somewhere as well, that would be amazing, because if you just like briefly check the game, it's not nothing special, but actually Karpov had like such a brilliant idea around move 40.
Okay.
But you will see that. All right. Thanks for joining me today as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Next week I will bring another topic. I'm not so sure what, but I will definitely try something new. Hope you enjoyed it.
I did. Thank you.
Yeah, guys, I will continue with some blitz. And all right, have a good day, Forky.
So do you.
See you next week.
Yeah. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye.
Okay, so this was it. I have to go back to school, and see you soon. Bye bye.